Hey folks, welcome. Thanks for joining us. We have a lot to go through today, and we're starting off with the best capture. In fact, it's probably the best capture we've featured on this channel, period. And I experienced it myself last Tuesday. I had something hovering, and I spotted it, so I pulled the camera out and recorded it, and I got 2.5 minutes of it. So I'm sharing it with you now. And my suggestion is hit mute and watch it for yourself and let it be your first experience with it, and you have your own initial impressions rather than having me in your ear. That's just me. That's how I would suggest you do it. Anyway, like I always say, please share these videos with people you think are like-minded or might enjoy them, and most importantly, please comment. Let us know what you think, and let's have an ongoing dialogue and see what we can figure out. Thanks, enjoy, see you on the other side. Okay, folks, so this is zoomed in but at real speed. And I spotted this with my naked eye, pulled out my phone, started recording, and it's 2 minutes and 30 seconds of this. A couple months back, I did a presentation called A High Strangeness Life, and in it, I mentioned briefly that my first experience with the phenomena occurred on Catalina Island as a child. I'm mentioning that now because this is essentially the same thing that I saw in the late 70s and early 80s in Catalina. The only difference is that I saw it underwater while snorkeling repeatedly. I can get into that more another time. Anyway, the reason this is going periodically in and out of frame, number one, is because it's zoomed in, but number two, because keep in mind that I was experiencing this while I was recording it. And also there was a significant amount of glare on my phone screen, so it was tough to actually observe it through the camera or through the screen rather. But I was primarily watching it with my eyes and hoping I was capturing it. I also want to point out that as fortunate as I was to capture this, the reality is that this recording does not do justice to the brightness factor, which is why it caught my eye in the first place. It was like staring at a welder's torch in the sky. And so, like I said in the intro, this thing came in um, from my left and then basically hovered in front of me or above me for 2.5 minutes and then decided that it was time to leave, and it just went straight up in the air. Uh, Obviously, these are not the behaviors or characteristics of a Mylar balloon, and I just want to point that out. It was stagnant in the air until it wasn't. We're going to go over it briefly in a moment, but you might be able to perceive just in this original footage that there's a lot going on around this thing. This caused a lot of attention from other subjects in the sky. And this is it departing. And we're going to take another look at that. This is slowed, but it's from the regular distance. So this is the distance that I was looking at it and observing it. And then, like I said, it's slow motion. When it decides that it needs to leave, this is what it does. It just goes up. Now we'll look at it again in real speed a few times. So yeah, I mean, it didn't take off at light speed or anything, but it was definitely different than anything we're used to seeing. And now we're going to take a look at some of the activity around it. This is paused, and hopefully this translates, but you can see these black dots. Then we roll it, and you can see things happening around this thing. And those aren't camera artifacts. And here's another pause, and hopefully you can see some of these things. But this is activity that's difficult to discern, but it's happening. And so we're going to highlight a few of the more obvious ones here. And you can see it down at the 7 o'clock area right there. And then this next one's super obvious, but that happened. And then here's another one where this thing at the 9 o'clock spot does that, and then a frame or two later it's down at the bottom right, and then it exits by bolting straight left across the bottom. So we're going to round out this seminal aspect of this presentation just with a zoomed in, slowed version, so you can see for yourself what this phenomena was doing in our sky. The intensity changes, the shape changes, the coloration, just everything about it was dynamic. Okay, let's move on to an airshow capture. This speaks for itself. I wanted to slow and include this because I know some of you may be curious to see whether it was in front or behind the wing. So here's that footage. And this also happened about 2 seconds after that first capture. So if you go back and watch the real-time footage, you'll see this too. Here's another one of these planes, which is at 16,000 plus feet in altitude with something that seems to approach and pass it. We haven't captured one of these in a few weeks, so this was kind of cool. When you see this in real time, you're going to have to focus on the bottom of the screen and maybe the left third. So, like I said recently, to those who are getting into this as a hobby or whatever, when you're, looking at your footage, you got to look at the very beginning, the very end, all of it. And this is an example of also looking at the full scope of your frame, not just the subject, whether it's a plane or whatever. This was a strange one for me because even slowed and after seeing it and knowing that this one's coming from north to south, it's still tough to see in real time, and I'm not sure why that is. Okay, so first we're going to go over the easy part, which is this and then this. It just arcs across the top of the plane. And if you think it's a bird, I get it. Think you see wings, I get it. But if so, then what is this thing passing that, right? But this is the more interesting part. Look at above the cloud from left to right. So here it is slowed with the contrast changed so you can see it a bit better. But basically, this thing comes and like surfs this cloud. It seems to spread wings at some point right there, and then it kind of changes shape again and kind of turns into an orb like or a sphere. And there's that transition right here. And then all of a sudden it's sort of, It's like a sphere, like I said. So we're going to take another look at it here and then pause it right here. And that's where it seems to splay a bit for some reason. It's weird. And then we continue rolling, and then all of a sudden it's an orb. I don't know what these things are, but it fascinates me that people see some things and say, well, I see wings, therefore they're whatever. But what do you say when you don't see wings? Check out the variability with the dimming and the coloration here. When we record and observe insects and birds, we don't see them do this at all. They're the same in every frame. I don't know what this is, why it does this, and in fact, I don't even have a theory because I don't have enough information. I'm ill equipped to come up with a hypothesis based on what I have. All I know is that I'm observing something that does not look normal. This thing almost seems to be absorbed by something in the cloud, and you'll see what I mean. I mean, to me, there seems like there's three parts of that cloud that are moving when the rest of the cloud isn't, and that thing disappears into the middle one. I mean, that might be a stretch. I don't know. That's just what it looks like to me. But what is not a stretch is that something comes down and disappears. At 60 frames per second and 4K, you'd think that you'd be able to identify the source of propulsion and maybe, stabilization and steering mechanisms. But nope, it's like a javelin. That's like an S pattern or a zigzag of sorts. So even though this is really fast, this demonstrates maneuverability, which is pretty cool. And this one's a bit wacky because I don't know what kind of craft this is, but you know, the reason this is in here is because this thing does a loop around this helicopter. Check this out. For anybody who's watching this and thinks these are insects in the foreground, explain this. When you see enough of these, like I have, you start to understand why somebody like me has advanced past, the bug bird conversation and has transitioned on to what are these things, what are they doing, how do they do it. Those are the conversations that need to be had at this point. Obviously, I can't make any representations or warranties in terms of the proximity of these things to the planes, but these javelins only show up when the planes are around, so that cannot be a coincidence. Okay, so now watch this thing sort of blink in and out when it seems to be in front of or under the plane. Like, what is that about? It's obvious to me, but maybe it isn't to everybody else, so I'm just going to say, like, birds aren't flying around that are so fast they're, not observable with a naked eye. I mean, that's not really a thing. So when you see something at real speed and you can't see it, and you can only see it when you slow it down, and then it's blinking in and out, that has to be a reason for a conversation. All right, folks. So we're going to wind down the presentation with this capture, not because it's awesome or dynamic, but just because it's very ironic. Sky 9 is a well known news chopper in Los Angeles. We have things on our planet that can approach our aircraft at will. They don't get caught up in the jet streams, they don't get caught up in rotor wash, and they're all over the place. And the irony of this thing coming by a news helicopter and the copter has no clue of it is just crazy. All right, folks. Well, there you have it. I don't know if you call that an orb. I don't know what you call that thing that we started out with, but it was so bright. I just feel fortunate to have spotted it and was able to capture some footage of it. The other thing too that's interesting to me is that, like, if I hadn't captured it, right, or if I took that walk without my camera, say, and I just observed it, and then I called it in or reported it to MUFON or NUFORC, and there was somebody, it was a written report of my experience, it seems like it would be taken seriously, at least by this community. But the fact that I actually recorded it and am able to report it myself, all of a sudden it seems to detract from the experience. And I'm not sure why that is. And I feel like that's kind of a microcosm of the Kenmore experience in Las Vegas. Like, if they hadn't called 911 and they hadn't, recorded it, but they reported it, then the UFO community would be like, oh, there was an experience in Vegas. But, this family had like a cantina scene going on in their backyard, and it's on camera, and the UFO community is like crickets. I don't understand it. Anyway, that's kind of how I feel about this thing myself. I was thinking, like, man, I'm so lucky to get this on camera. But then part of me is like, but are you? Because you just seem to, like, you put yourself out there and you share it and you just get vitriol and nonsense. But if it wasn't recorded, then people would want to hear from you and be like, oh, what was it like? It's like, well, I'll show you what it was like. So anyway, that's just my thought about it. So hope you enjoyed this presentation, and we will see you next time around. Thanks.